guys.
Hi.
I want to tell you some of my Jewish story, part of my Jewish story. I'll start in the middle, call it chapter 41. It took place in June 2022. I received smicha. I was ordained as a rabbi, which means that a team of rabbis decided I was worthy of being called rabbi too, and they gave me that title. What's unusual about that story is that they are Orthodox rabbis, and I'm an Orthodox woman. Usually only Orthodox men can become rabbis, but here I am. It is still hard to believe it really happened. That's chapter 41. Now let's flip back earlier in the book. Chapter 14. It took place when I was 14. I had just finished 8th grade at a school like Schechter in Toronto. I had been surrounded by Jewish friends my whole life, and I loved it, but I wanted to get out of the bubble and see the world. So my friend Claire and I went to camp in France, not a Jewish camp, where we were excited to meet kids from different countries, and I was sure it would be very exotic, and I'd come home with impressive stories to tell my friends. When we got there, we found out that the other girls in our bunk were from St. Louis, Missouri. And then we found out they were Orthodox Jews. This was not exactly what we had expected. We quickly became friends, and our time together had a big impact on me. The girls were serious about keeping mitzvot in a way I had never seen before. Each of them had brought one suitcase of clothes and one suitcase of kosher meals packed in foil that they would heat in hot water and eat off their own plates. They carried sidurim in their backpacks. They made Shabbat happen. I admired them so much. I loved the way they kept doing all their Jewish stuff, even though they were thousands of miles from their parents and no one was telling them to. I wanted to be more like them. That summer, and after that, I started imagining what it would be like to keep their kind of kosher and their kind of Shabbat. That's chapter 14. Fast forward to chapter 17. I was in 11th grade, and I went on a trip to Poland and Israel with other teenagers from Toronto. I met some kids who lived in my neighborhood, but who I'd never met before because they went to Orthodox schools. We became friends, and I loved spending time with them on Shabbat. They didn't use phones on Shabbat, and they also never seemed to make plans ahead of time, but they always ended up spending the whole day together in people's backyards and driveways, and I became part of their group too, and I loved it. Part of being a kid is figuring out what kind of you you're going to be. And I was figuring out that the me-ist I could be, the thing that felt the most right for me, the most true to me, was an Orthodox life, following traditional interpretations of Torah and halacha, with Jewish wisdom guiding every part of my life. How I pray, eat, talk, dress, read, write. There are so many ways to be Jewish. In this room, people are Jewish in many different ways. I was realizing that this was my way to be Jewish. And I love it, and it doesn't feel like something I chose. It feels like the person I am. Now we're at a chapter called It's Complicated. One big difference between Orthodox communities and other Jewish places is that in Orthodox communities, there are very different roles for men and women. For example, men and women sit separately in shul, and only men can count in a minyan or lead certain tefillot. So I was in college thinking about my future and figuring out what my life's work would be, and I wondered what it would be like to be a rabbi. But 20 years ago, there were no Orthodox women rabbis. But I knew that I could still do a lot of the things rabbis do. I could learn Torah, I studied Jewish texts in college, and for 3 years full-time after that, and I could teach Torah. I became a teacher first in New York and then in Boston. And during those years when I was teaching, some of my heroes, amazing, brave, inspiring rabbis, were pushing for change. In 2009, they did something that made some people angry and some very confused, and some of us very happy and excited. They opened a yeshiva, a center for advanced Jewish learning that would train Orthodox women to be rabbis and give them ordination, called Yeshivat Maharat. For many years, I admired the place from afar. I didn't know how I could become a student at this point in my life. But finally, I decided it was time. I became a student again. I found breaks between teaching my own classes and before my kids woke up and after they went to bed and during the summers to study on my own and with my chavruta and with my class. I missed work here sometimes to go to New York for special classes, and finally, I took all my tests and I reached the end last June, and now here we are. My Jewish story, the parts of it that I just told you, has some important characters in it. My friends from St. Louis and Toronto, my teachers and rabbis. It has even more important characters I didn't tell you about. My parents, my grandparents. You, my students, are also characters in my Jewish story. Think for a second about your own Jewish story. Who are the characters in the story? And then think for a second, are you a character in someone else's Jewish story? What kind of character are you? What role do you have? Ani ma'amina. I believe that being a Jewish community means being characters in each other's stories, in ways we know about and ways we might not know about. So it's each of our job to be the best version of that character that we can be. Thank you.